So what does it actually say? So in setting out to write a common language for asset management, we set out with this mission that it needed to cover all of an organization, top to bottom, as well as all the different functions and silos that exist in organizations. So if you look at it, you'll see that it's a management system framework, so it provides guidelines and requirements on how your management system should be set up. For those of you who are familiar with ISO 9000 or ISO 14000, you will recognize the structure, you will recognize many of the requirements, and that makes it consistent and easy to implement in organizations that have other management system requirements already in use. It follows a plan, do, check, act cycle, which many of you will recognize, and it's full of lots of stuff that is all very exciting, but people often say, well, what's the real message in there? And for me, I think the real message is based around four things, which are in the image on the right of this slide. So the first one is that organizations need to have aligned objectives. They should be aligned top to bottom and across the organization and consistent with each other. Sounds really obvious. I think pretty much most organizations at the beginning of their asset management journey, when they start challenging themselves, realize that their objectives aren't actually that well aligned. You have departments who have objectives that conflict with other departments and create tension, and that therefore makes it difficult to make decisions in an organization. The second of these four things is rules for transparent and consistent decision making. So we should have some rules that enable us to decide where we're spending our limited finance, pounds, euros, dollars, whatever currency we happen to be using. I'll come back to those first two in a minute, because the subject of today's webinar is value, values, and asset management. And I think having aligned objectives and rules focuses really strongly on value and values. The third of these is taking a long-term strategic view. Again, it sounds really obvious, but we live in a short-term world, and many organizations struggle even to take a view as long as a business planning cycle. If you're a regulated industry, you've probably got a regulatory cycle. But often if you're an infrastructure organization, your asset life cycles extend way beyond a business planning cycle or regulatory cycle. So trying to force organizations to look really long-term, take a long-term view of how they invest in their asset base and how they manage risks associated with their asset base is a challenge. And ISO 55000 forces that thinking into the controls and processes in place in the organization. And the final one is risk-based decision-making from a position of knowledge. Kind of bundled up two things in that one. Making decisions based on risk, but also making decisions from a position of knowledge rather than just gut feeling, he who shouts loudest, all the things you tend to see in organizations. So if you remember nothing else about ISO 55000, I think there's four things in there we need to remember. And if you struggle with those four, you can simplify that down to one, which is if we only have 100 euros left, what do we spend it on to generate the greatest value for our organization?